everyone, Colin Cadet here for Woodwork Web. In this episode I want to talk about stains and dyes for wood. Now a lot of you have probably already used stains, but I'll bet you not very many of you are familiar with dyes. And that's what we're going to talk about today, the differences and why you would select one over the other. Now just so you have a little bit of an idea of what we're talking about when we're talking about dyes and stains, there's a very big difference between dyes and stains. Stains, which a lot of you are familiar with, are basically made from dirt. They're taken from ground up clays, red, brown clays. They're ground up very fine. They're often mixed with an oil base, and that's what makes a stain. So it's basically ground up dirt. Dyes, on the other hand, are normally organic materials of different colors that are ground up, blended, and they're water soluble, so there's a big difference in the look that they give. But what's even more important is how they are applied on the wood. Now a stain will look like this. Imagine this blue square here is your wood. A stain will go on like this. A stain basically sits on top of your wood. Now it will penetrate a very little bit into the wood, but basically if you put a stain on and you don't like it, you can sand it off, assuming you're not dealing with veneers, but it sits basically on top. A dye, on the other hand, because it's a water-soluble material, it actually comes right in, it loads right into the wood, so that if you dye a wood, it actually goes deeper, it goes right in, and it's very difficult to sand that out. So to prove my point, here's a can of stain. Now I haven't used this can for probably over a year, and when we mix it, because any of these painting materials, staining materials, finishing materials, you always need to make sure that they're stirred well. Now look at that. See that globby material? That's basically ground up clay or dirt. I call it dirt. It basically is dirt. And once you keep mixing that around, of course, it becomes fluid. It becomes a flux that you can then paint on. But if you don't stir that stuff all drops to the bottom of the can, and you need to stir it. So that's what a stain is. Now, stains, the advantage of stains, because they're dirt, they're very, very color fast. And that's why when you buy stains for your fence, this is what you get, basically a ground up dirt, because they're color fast. When they're subjected to lots of sunlight, they don't fade because, again, it's dirt. So if you need something that's very color fast, you can paint stains on and it lasts a long, long time. Basically, it needs to fall off the fence before it goes away. It basically won't stain or won't fade. Most of you are probably already familiar with using stains. You mix them well, paint them on your project, coat it on well, wait for a certain length of time to allow the stain to soak in as much as it can, and then you wipe it off. And that's how a stain works. But let's look at dyes now. So this is a dye. Comes in this case, comes in a little plastic package. This is a 1 ounce package of dye, and it's a burnt umber. It's basically like a lot of the stains, and I think you can probably see the color. In a second we're going to be mixing it here. We have here a quart, because this they recommend to mix with a quart of warm water. And that's what we're going to do right now, just to show you what this looks like and how it mixes. And basically it's just a powder. You just pour it in and mix it around. Now one of the things you'll notice when you're mixing it is it doesn't have the same look as a stain, it actually has a transparent look. Even when you mix it have it all mixed up, you can actually, depending on the color, now this is a little bit of a darker color, but even on a little bit of a lighter color, you can actually see right through the glass jar. And that's because it has a bit of a transparent look to it. And we're going to put this on some wood. Right now we're going to show you the difference between putting on some dyes and stains. Now, to help you visualize what I'm talking about the transparencies of dyes compared to the opaqueness of stains, what I've done, I've actually got a piece of clear plexiglass here, and I'm going to coat one side with this stain, and it's already been mixed up. You'll be able to see what I mean. Now that's the stain side. This is the dye side. And there you can see the difference. I can't see the camera now through the stain, but I can see it through the dye. And that's because, now it's running off because it's a little bit water-based too, but you can still see that there you can see my face. There you can't see my face. It's a block, it's an opaque. And that's the difference between dyes and stains. That's how they lay on the wood. Now what I'm showing here is a small piece of veneered bird's eye maple. And the reason I'm using this is so that you'll be able to see, hopefully we'll be able to see through the veneer so that we can actually see what the dyes and stains. But mostly what I want to show you is hopefully you'll be able to see the depth and the color that something like this figured wood will give. And we'll be able to see the difference that it makes when we use a dye in one side and a stain in the other. So here's our figured maple. We've got a couple of little stain droplets on there already. So I'm just going to put that on top of there like that. I'm not going to let this sit very long at all because this is particularly opaque. And we'll wipe that off right away. Okay, now let's try the dye on the other side. And you can see instantly when it goes on how much more transparent the dye is. And we're not going to get much chance to wipe that off because that's already soaked in. There, now already you can see the difference. This is the dye, this is the stain. See how the figure in the wood, how much more prominent that is? See how the stain has masked the figure in this wood. But even more, and maybe a little bit hard for you to see, but the penetration, you can see, even in this, you can see in all of the little dots here how this has penetrated much more. See the dye, or the stain on this side, has not penetrated through other than drops that I've got down here. But you can see how the stain has already, you can actually see the dots where it's coming through, it's been staining through. So that's the difference between a stain, this is a stain, this is a dye. Now, dyes come in a variety of different shades of brown and red. You can also get green and red and blue. So you can get literally every color of the rainbow, even yellow. So you can get a wide variety of different shades of stains or of dyes, just as you can of stains. You get a wide selection of dyes. Basically, they're all earthen. So with your stains, if there's an earth color, an earth tone, you'll be able to get a stain that color. Now there's another dye that I want to talk about briefly, and that's an ebony dye. Now I've mixed up this ebony dye. They recommend that you mix it up one package, like we just mixed up the dye before, one package to a quart. I like to mix my ebony a little bit darker because I want to see it a little bit dark. I want to make it as dark as I can. So when we're woodworkers, we like to use ebony as a highlight wood for a variety of things. So today we're going to actually paint this board with ebony so you can see what an ebony dye looks like. And we'll give you a close-up of that in just a second here. And there's that ebony stain. And you can see how lovely it is, rich, rich black. Now, if you wanted a little bit more grain to actually show through, a little bit more grain of the wood, you could actually dilute this. I've mixed this twice as thick as they recommend. You could mix it normally, or you can even just take a little bit out and just dilute it a little bit and see what kind of an ebony dye that you can get. But this makes an excellent highlight wood, and what's particularly nice about the dyes is after this is dried, you can actually see the grains in there just like you can with an ebony wood. So a lot of you are probably wondering, well, why don't we just use dyes instead of stains? Well, there's a bit of a problem. Like everything, there's pros and cons. Of course, the con with using dyes is they're water-based. You just saw me mix up a batch here. It's water-based. So that means that it does lift the grain, and that means that you either need to use a scraper or do a very light sanding over top before you put on your final finish coat. So that's the disadvantage of dyes. Of course, the disadvantage of stains, as we've already seen, is that they mask a lot of the wood grain, particularly if you're working with a figured wood. Now, stains are popular. You can buy them at any paint store anywhere around the country. Dyes are a little bit harder to find. You're going to have to look a little bit harder for them. They're typically available at places like Lee Valley, Rockler, those kinds of stores, or specialty wood stores will have dyes available or know where you can get dyes. So that's a look today at the difference between stains and dyes, and now you know the difference. You can make some wise choices when you're finishing your projects. I'm Colin Canet for Woodwork Web. Thanks for watching. Now, before we end this video, I did want to take this opportunity, now that this bird's eye veneer is dry, this is 24 hours later, so that you can actually see, this is the stained side, of course, this is the dyed side. And you can see, when I move this around in the light, how the stained side is really, it's blocked all of the figure from the wood. But the other side, when I move that around in the wood, you can see all the bird's eye, and you can actually still see the depth of the wood. And that's what dyes do. So, it's your choice whether you use dyes or stains, depending on the project that you're working on, but now you have the knowledge of knowing what to do.